All right, Sheila, you are running for mayor 2021 here in Minneapolis. What was the deciding factor for you to say, yeah, I'm gonna run? Was it people asking you to? Because back in the day, candidates would be nominated by the people around them. Did you have people around you saying, hey, you should run, or would you just at some point say, I'm gonna do this?
Yeah, so I've been doing policy work and community organizing for a decade and spent the last 3 years specifically focused on the city budget. Mm-hmm. And so the moment for me was this year when we had fought for these pretty small, in this grand scheme of what should have happened, wins related to safety. It moved $8 million into alternatives to policing, and our current mayor threatened to veto the whole budget based on a hypothetical future staffing number of police.
Okay.
And that was my moment where I thought, wow, that would have put the property tax levy would have been negated, which means the entire pot of funds for the city would have shrank, which means city workers would have had economic implications, means city services would have been cut, all over this law and order rhetoric, posturing. And so for me, that was like, okay, we need someone in office who's ready to fight for the people, fight for budgets that matter. Yeah. And I asked around current politicians, who's going to run for mayor, who wants to be mayor, and no one was interested, and they said, you should do it. And so I held 3, I called them dream and scheme meetings, asking folks in community organizers, do you want me to run? If I do run, what do you want to see? What should we be prioritizing? Kind of taking that community-sourced approach. Yeah. And then I decided to run.
Well, there you go. So when you did the dream and scheme meetings, like what was like brought up in some of those meetings? Like what were people saying they wanted more of or less of?
Yeah. One thing we talked about a lot is how we need a mayor who can be a channel for the movement to come into City Hall. And some of the downfall, whether with Bernie or some of the past candidates, is it became about this one person, this one enigmatic figure, right? Mm-hmm. And then the movement kind of dissipated in a way if that one person couldn't carry it. And so that's why I call my campaign For the People. Yeah. And so I've been thinking really intentionally about how I can make it about movement building and about bringing more people into the electoral process, and not just about me. But of course,
yeah, and it should be about the people. I mean, it really should. And so when you're moving forward, how are you making this about the people? How are you decentering kind of yourself? Because it's got to be tough. Because every campaign I've ever seen is me. How are you doing that?
Yeah, so I started out with not releasing a policy platform at the beginning. Because for me, as someone who, before I got involved in electoral politics, when politicians came out off the bat with this list of, here are all the solutions for your community, sign on and endorse me. Yeah,
they impose it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And those are, when I was a restaurant worker, I didn't have mayoral candidates coming up to me and being like, what do you need? What's going on for you? Yeah. So instead, I put out my values at the beginning. And then I had this series called Policy by the People, where we got to source solutions from community, like what's working in your neighborhood for safety, for environmental justice, whatever it may be, and what's really going on too. What are the problems on the ground that aren't just these big issues, and let's develop it together. So that was the beginning, and of course it was COVID too, so we had to do everything virtually, so we'll keep building that throughout the campaign. But it needs to come from the people. Yeah,
as opposed to, look, I know what needs to happen here, and everybody should listen to me when I'm telling you what you need.
Yeah, here's your plan for ending homelessness in 5 years.
Well, I mean, and that is a particularly heated topic, because when you talk about human rights or civil rights, you can't really get into it with talking about housing rights or economic justice What do you, and this is a question from a policy person that sent this in, what is your definition of affordable housing?
Yeah, great. So affordable housing right now is defined as 60% area median income often, right? Which includes, includes the metro area. And it's way higher than the Minneapolis area median income. So truly affordable housing, in the wonky terms, is like moving it from 60% to 30% AMI, I think is one way to talk about it.
What does AMI stand for?
Area median income.
Area median income, okay.
Yeah, so that's what I think we need to fight for, and that's going to can't just happen at the city level. It's going to take cooperation across levels of government. But we need to stop putting out press releases that say we built new affordable housing when no one could afford to live in it.
No, not at all, not at all. And it was interesting because I know that in Ward 10, I mean, an entire apartment building, the foundation was cracked while they were building these really, I don't want to get into meriting it, but they were building a giant condo. And when they were building the condo, they cracked the foundation of the apartment next to it. They then bought that apartment, decimated that, and now it's a grassy field. But people that were in that apartment had to leave and experienced, being unhoused, for moments. So my question to you is like, how do you approach, kind of this, almost this invasion of, I don't want to say the invasion of the slumlords, but like property or landlords that don't really have any culpability or accountability to the people. Like, how does one even like approach that? Or is that within the mayor's power at all?
Yeah, so I support the rent control charter amendment. And if we're able to pass that, we can also pass all these tenant protections that go along with it. And I'd love to see more like a fully funded tenant protection board.
Wow.
And free right to counsel for tenants, so that when there are bad landlords, people can take them to court. I've definitely had bad landlords before. I had to move 3 times in 1 year once because someone bought my building, and then I had a bad landlord, and then I had a bad roommate. And so
yeah. And some people don't have the agency or the financial privilege to move that many times. That's just not, it's not a reality. So, I mean, some people, they move and it's them moving out of their apartment and that's that. So when we talk about, is affordable even the right word? Some people say sustainable, or, applying a different word to creating, housing justice in town. What would rent control look like to you?
Rent control, so I really like the Minneapolis United for rent control. They have a 5-point plan that ties it to inflation or a certain amount, has protections to keep landlords from raising rent this year. It's just like a very smart, well-researched, reasonable plan, I think. And they have connections to cities who are doing this work across the country. So I think that's a good model, and it's led by community, right? Again, it's led by renters, which is super important. I also think we should talk about public housing. Public housing has this stigmatization to it, which I think is ultimately racism. But we could build more public housing in Minneapolis, and we could build dignified public housing and improve current public housing, and that builds community safety too,
So speaking of racism, when we look at Minneapolis, speaking of racism, Minneapolis. But when we talk about race in Minnesota or Minneapolis, a lot of people sleep on the fact that it wasn't too long ago, Minnesota was rated as one of the most unwelcoming states in the country. And the top 2 demographics that were leaving were people that were coming in from out of town and being like culturally like, nobody says hi to me. And the other demographic was young professionals of color saying, I'm not gonna put up with this anymore, I'm getting out. And the way that cognitive dissonance works is we perpetuate, white supremacy and racism by not talking about it. And when I say we, I mean elected officials, people in power, law enforcement. How do you address racism in Minneapolis, or racial disparity, if we're getting more specific about it, in employment, education, and law enforcement?
Yeah, no small question, huh?
Just really want a quick chit chat with you. How do we fix the race problem? No. But how do you address racial disparity in Minneapolis? I mean,
yeah, I mean, it goes across all the realms, right? Like you just said. I think one way is to trust people of color to come up with solutions for our own communities. So like, we're here by the East Phillips Indoor Urban Farm.
Mm-hmm.
East Phillips is one of the most polluted areas in the city.
Yeah.
And has been historically, to the point where at one point there was so much arsenic in the ground that they had to dig up all the soil in people's yards and replace it.
They called it the arsenic triangle.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is technically a green zone as well, but we haven't seen actual resources at the scale that the community is asking for to fund solutions that would benefit the Indigenous and POC communities here. Mm-hmm. Until this Roof Depot site, which hopefully will be turned into an indoor urban farm. So I think putting money into the hands of the people is a way to do it.
Yeah.
That's why I love participatory budgeting, and as mayor would fight to institute participatory budgeting, where we set aside a chunk of money for community to decide how it's going to be spent. Mm-hmm. And I also, this is like, so my motto is from the streets to the spreadsheets, because I'm such a nerd, but also an organizer, you know?
I love it.
So, but participatory budgeting, and then we have to move to biannual budgeting at the city too, because right now, every year we have a new budget cycle, and so city staff, community members spend half the year fighting for the money they're gonna spend the other half of the year, and then it starts again. And so experiments, projects that take time to develop, that, you know, we could have in communities like East Phillips, we need to give it more time and space to grow.
Absolutely. And going hand in hand with racial disparity in the city, I mean, you can't talk about it without talking about law enforcement. My question is, after this city has been entirely activated and it's not really going away at all, I mean, when something happens that even, you know, seems of injustice, people are there. I mean, we're going to show up. My question is, how do you address policing right now? Like, what is your stance on it? When you said you started your website, you started with your values. What is your stance on policing right now?
Yeah. Well, my value on the website is safety and justice are intertwined, and you can't get to one without the other. And my area of expertise is in building safety beyond policing without policing, and I was one of the founding members of MPD 150 and Reclaim the Block, so really can imagine a police-free future.
Yeah.
And the way we get there is by making sure people have what they need.
Yes.
To live, to thrive, because most crime that happens is not because of individual moral failure or randomness. It's because people don't have what they need.
Exactly.
And so for me to address safety in Minneapolis, so if we take that broad umbrella and say, how are we going to make Minneapolis safe? It's about putting more resources into Black and brown communities and Indigenous communities. It's about funding youth programming that doesn't have to go through the police department, right? Yeah. Because some parts of Minneapolis right now, the most programming they get is through the police department.
Yeah.
And that's very expensive at the very least, you know? So, and then for law enforcement, there's a lot of places we can take away from right now that has nothing to do with emergency response. So I study the budget. That's my role currently in my work, and has been what I've been doing for years. So I read all the line items in the police budget. And there's so much in there that people don't understand has nothing to do with what we see in policing. So like, they spend $8 million on special operations and surveillance. Okay. So that's like SWAT teams, the riot stuff we saw used against protesters this summer.
Yeah.
$8 million.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. Yeah. And then, yes, there's so much in the numbers. And so we have programs like Stable Homes, Stable Schools, started by Mayor Fry. And they changed that to ongoing funding this year of $2.1 million a year. It's at 12 schools. And if you read through the line items in the MPD budget, we spend $3.1 million on the K-9 unit.
Okay.
So
We
tell
spend
me.
more on the dogs than we do on stable homes, stable communities. Is that what it was?
Stable schools, yeah.
Stable schools.
Yeah, which helps homeless and highly mobile youth and families.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've worked as a paraprofessional with homeless and highly mobile students, as it's phrased, but more money is spent on the canines than on students that are experiencing, or that are in homeless and highly mobile situations.
Yeah.
That's remarkable. That's deeply concerning.
Yeah, so as mayor, I'm going to use that knowledge that I have and that is growing in community to see how can we put resources into things that are emergencies, like people experiencing homelessness because of our housing crisis. So, yeah, and the final thing I'll say of my Streets to the Spreadsheets victory was this summer I was reading through while we were doing the special budget season in July and seeing, okay, where can we cut and move money into emergency response. And I found this line item after going through the city's website, and it's so hard to find, and it was for the mounted patrol. Guess how much the city was spending on mounted patrol every year?
2-3 million?
Not quite that much, but it was almost $1 million.
What was the mountain patrol doing in Minneapolis? What?
We were the last city to have a mounted patrol in Minnesota.
Where are the mountains, Sheila? Can you point me towards the mountains in this city?
I remember this moment during the uprising of going to the 3rd precinct to medic, and the horse trailer was by the Domino's.
Yeah.
And having this total, That's
I remember.
it.
Yeah, I remember. I was allegedly on a highway with some other folks, and that was the mountain patrol, the guys on the horses.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
So if you add that with the canine unit, that's $4 million on horses and dogs.
Yeah.
And $2.1 million to homeless and highly mobile youth.
Yeah. So we cut the mounted patrol though this year.
Well,
so I saw that and I was like, okay, we got to talk about this. This is crazy.
Yeah.
And we kept bringing it up. And we got that money moved to mental health responders.
Great. Yes.
And that's the kind of that's my safety plan right there.
And I'm sure there's a bunch of other, from the Streets to the Spreadsheets, where you're seeing a ton of other stuff, where they're probably spending money on wallpaper, or to build a new 3rd precinct or something like that, which I don't know if they don't need it, but the idea is, I saw a SWAT tank at the University of Minnesota that looked like it was ready to fight Voltron, and I was like, why is this thing here? It was it wasn't National Guard, it was it was a giant SWAT tank. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. So when we talk about budget, our current mayor right now said that equated saying that the spike in crime is correlated with people saying defund the police. Do you believe that that's true? And what has been if not, what is the effect of the phrase defund the police done?
Yeah, I don't think that's true.
You don't think crime is spiked because people said defund the police?
No, I think it's because, we've seen it across the nation.
Yeah.
I think that a global pandemic has something to do with it. Economic crisis, kids haven't been in school for a year.
Yeah.
I think that all leads to increases in crime that we've seen happen over and over again during times of economic downturn.
Yeah.
I think what the phrase defund the police did was push people's thinking one step further. We went from reform being the norm that we talked about of, okay, we want more body cameras, we want BCA investigation, whatever it is.
Yeah.
When police violence happens, to now it's well, maybe we should change the whole system.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they tried reform with Boza. And Boza came in to change everything. And he's literally quoted in an Old Star Tribune article saying, I couldn't get rid of the bad guys and the drunks fast enough. And so, it just tells you that reform wasn't really going to happen, even when they tried to, change the leadership. So, correct me if I'm wrong, the mayor has the power to fire the chief of police in Minneapolis. Chief of police has the power to fire police?
Well, the union, or the federation, excuse me, they're not actually a union.
Yeah.
The federation in order to fire a police officer, you have to go through the federation, any union.
Yeah. And so with that being said, with that power dynamic, and I spoke with Michelle Gross at Communities United Against Police Brutality I spoke with Christelle Porter about kind of legislating that ability out to other people, so it's not just the chief of police is like, power, everybody can do it. That person can fire you, that person can fire you, it's not just me. In Minneapolis, we have a 0.42% of an officer being reprimanded by the Office of Police Conduct Review, which pales in comparison to the national average of 7 to 8%. What would you do to at least, get us somewhere to some type of accountability? There was a cop that came into the square, body slammed a guy to the ground, dislocated his shoulder, and he had a laundry list of complaints, and none of them had been, there were no consequences with any of them. What would you do to possibly change that if you wanted to?
Yeah, so I think it starts with reducing dependence on policing, right? So let's reduce potentially harmful contact, have other responders out there.
Yeah.
In terms of disciplinary things, the contract is a barrier. So the contract has been out of compliance since 2019, or expired at the end of 2019. And we studied it, folks, Communities United and folks that Reclaim the Block, and we studied it and said, okay, how can we change this to make those accountability measures better? And the Federation has very little motivation in the contract to negotiate because all their raises, everything keeps going after it expires.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. Michelle is, so she probably knows some.
Well, I don't know if Michelle's a lawyer. Michelle's just been studying it for 20 years. She's just extremely well read on it.
Yeah.
And I talked to Christelle about they're negotiating a new union contract, which is going to be huge.
Yeah.
But would you want to see higher discipline, like more discipline with officers that have complaints or commit to police brutality in the police department?
Yeah, I think anyone who's committing violence on their job should probably not be doing that job.
No.
No, the mechanism how we get there, so we've had 5 different civilian review or civilian oversight councils in Minneapolis over the since 1963. And each of them has been co-opted or had any of their power stripped away. So, like Stanek became a representative and went and stripped away the power for civilians to fire and hire. Yeah. So in order to change that, we need to look at state law as well. And also, that's why I'm interested too in broader work on just reducing reliance on policing. Because, as organizers, it's our duty to use tactics that won't be co-opted by those in power. And this tactic we've been trying over and over again of civilian review councils has been co-opted 5 times. So I'm also trying to shift my thinking to say, okay, what's our broader vision?
This isn't working anymore. What can we do?
Yeah.
Well, as Dave Bicking would always call the civilian review, he would always, Dave Bicking from Communities United Against Police Brutality, he would always, without a beat, always referenced it as the civilian review, which is just a tremendous failure. And I just was like, I've never heard anybody say tremendous failure that many times. So basically reducing the dependence on police and, creating different routes, maybe even for mental health calls. When you look at folks like Patrick Warren Sr. in Texas, is having a mental health episode, they roll up and then they end up shooting him. Would there be something that you would create I'm so hesitant to use the word safety net now. Is there the governor ruined the term safety net. Is there anything that you would use as an alternative or a different means of addressing mental health calls rather than police showing up?
Yeah, so I was part of a coalition this fall that fought for independent mental health responders, and we won that fight. And there were some key council members and city staff who were really fighting for that as well. But we only won enough funding for 2 teams of 2 people every day. And it was a battle, mind you. It was a battle to be able to get that. And then the mayor threatened to veto the budget anyway, you know? So, like, no.
That's wild.
Yeah. Kudos to those who got us that far. But if I'm elected mayor, I would like to fund solutions like that at the scale of the need, right? Because there's going to be more than 2 mental health crises at a time.
Yeah.
And under this current model, if there are, then MPD is dispatched. You know, so there's not, I know a lot of people who don't call 911 when they have a loved one in a mental health crisis because they're scared for them. And so if it's not a guaranteed non-police response, people still aren't going to use the service.
Well, let's go there, man. Let's assume you got elected. What's the first thing you're doing when you walk in?
Yeah, the first thing I'm doing, that's exciting. So the first thing I'm doing is listening to what community wants me to do. Yeah. So I'm hoping by the time new slate of council, new mayor is ready, there's going to be
new council,
there's going to be a people's platform ready. And then we start figuring out how to build on that platform. And one of the reasons I decided to run for mayor is because I'm a coalition builder. I've been an organizer for a long time, building coalitions across all different scales, and that's what we need a mayor to do, is someone who can work with the county, work with the city council, work with the Board of Estimate and Taxation. And so the first thing I do is start building coalitions to move some real money and real policies. And since it's only 2-year council terms too, it's important that we go in strong at the beginning to be able to move things before everyone starts running for re-election again.
Somebody once told me that running for an elected official seat you will undoubtedly be hated by somebody. Let's say you make a decision and people pull up to outside of your house. And this is a giant hypothetical. But we've seen this now because this culture is being created of, it's a pandemic. Wow, we didn't like that decision that so-and-so made. We're going to pull up and demand justice. What would you do?
I would go out.
Okay.
And listen.
Yeah.
I think that's what an elected official should do. Yeah. But here's the thing, is every time a group of people pulled up at that elected official's house, they had already asked for meetings over and over and over again. You know, and that's what we don't see on the news, and there's all this rhetoric about, like, we need to have more respectful tactics. And I can say I know personally that meetings were asked for.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, there was a few, olive branches extended. And it's like, no. Okay.
Like the traditional route, like, okay, you want to go through these traditional routes of discussion and making change? Okay, great, let's try that. And then if that's not working, got to take it to the next level. So I hope as mayor that I have taken the meetings first. And then if there's still that level of upset with a decision I make, then okay, we discuss it at that level.
Yeah, it's like reverse spreadsheets to the streets. It's just like from emails to the streets. You've seen all my emails. I know you have. Now I'm going to come to your front door. And I get that as well. And I think, we saw that with the city council. What would your relationship be with the city council? We're just hypothetically assuming you're in. What's your relationship going to be with the city council?
Yeah, I hope that we can build and move together.
Yeah, there seems to be a separation right now.
Yeah, there seems to be a separation, and I think that there's a lot of potential for building and moving together. And I don't support the Charter Commission's strong mayor amendment, which would move all department supervision under the mayor, because council members can be so much more accountable to their people. They're more accessible. They're more known.
I mean, they're on their front lawn, like, gardening. Like, I'm talking to one of the candidates, and, like, she knows everybody in her neighborhood. Like, and that's just what it is. And we're in a weak mayor. What is it for?
Yeah, some people call it weak mayor system.
Michelle Gross called it weak mayor. I didn't know if that's pointed. I'm sorry.
No. It's okay. It's like that is what some of the pro-strong mayors like to use that. But
okay.
I like to frame it as a diffuse power system, right? And so you need more collective governance to move things. But if 4 years under Donald Trump has taught us anything, it's that concentrating power under one person is probably a bad idea.
Yeah.
And if there are coordination issues, if there are problems with staff getting pulled other places, I think the issue is that council staff or council members don't have enough staff right now.
Mm-hmm.
They only get 2 staff people
Yeah.
to answer all constituent calls, to do policy research and all of that, and it's just not enough. And of course, they don't get stuff done. You know, I mean, they do. I have a lot of respect for them, but like other city staff get pulled in, and this is kind of the argument for transforming to this quote unquote strong mayor system.
Yeah, and then if you're running on the idea of like for the people, and you want to spread the power out, I mean, and so it goes.
Yeah.
You seem really excited about that. I mean, the thing is that I'm learning, even just talking to you, is like how much, the relationship between city council and the mayor, how important that is.
Mm-hmm.
And although that got, it seems to be kind of disconnected right now, it seems to be a very important thing, just because, if you can lean on, the people that you're working with, and you can work together, then you can have a better city.
Yeah.
So, there has been, I mean, just because it's here and we got to talk about it, there's been gun violence really all over the city, and I don't want to polarize it on one neighborhood, because there was a large shooting outside of a club in downtown. There was a mass shooting in Uptown last summer, and recently there were shootings over on the north side that resulted in 2 young children dying, and another one that's still hospitalized. How do you address gun violence? And we talked about this earlier, and we even talked about this on Good Morning Minneapolis, it being, more of an economic situation. But what is your take on it, and how would you approach it here in Minneapolis?
Yeah. I actually watched your Good Morning Minneapolis.
Oh, you did?
It.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I agree. Economic issues really drive a lot of the gun violence that we see. And so, as mayor, I would what if we did emergency jobs deployment? If we have enough money to build a $1 million fence, and however many millions they spent on the National Guard.
That fence costed more than $1 million. And there's no way the rental rate, I'm sorry, but yeah, if we had the money to militarize downtown,
Yeah, right. And a lot of it needs to be longer term solutions, right?
Yeah.
We need to have more programs for youth in general, so that if you want to make good money, have a good house, you can afford it, you have the opportunities, and again, the spreadsheets. Financial literacy. One of my friends runs a finance club at one of the high schools and works with kids who, can't really don't see the projection of how you can build wealth, right?
Yeah.
And how if you start saving now, that adds up, because we don't really teach that traditionally.
No.
And how important it is to being able to have a sense of hope, to see that, I mean, under capitalism, ideally, we could abolish the system of capitalism. But in the meantime, it is nice to see that even when you're working minimum wage now, which I worked minimum wage for a long time, that you can build up to owning a home or whatever it is that you want to do with your life.
Being able to envision it. And I think capitalism is an interesting term, because I was thinking about this, and I was just talking to a friend about it, and I feel like capitalism looks different to some of my some of my black friends than it does to some of my white friends. Like folks in Lyndhurst and Kenwood, like the average property value in Kenwood is $1,080,000. I mean, in Jordan is $200,000. I mean, that's a fifth. Yeah. Your reality is different. I remember there were studies done in Flatbush, New York, that said it's statistically impossible for somebody to get into college out of here. But I mean, obviously people are going to college from Flatbush, but statistically, like the odds are way against somebody. So emergency jobs, and what else would increase the odds for people to have opportunities in places like the North Side or Phillips?
Yeah. Well, I think it gets to that self-determination piece too, right? Being able to choose the right solutions for your communities. We could do rapid response funding distribution determined by community members. And the thing is, right now we've been trying the same thing, right? Which is policing, which uses a lot of funds.
More cops, yes.
And that's why I'm comfortable with putting money into some more experimental things. And we saw this summer people come up and take care of one another in really creative ways, you know, and the way that we built safety was through relationships.
Yeah.
And so I think that we have to be willing to experiment in that level as well, and not just rely on systems that further poverty and further these like cycles of economic crisis, and that's why it's important to me too to think about decriminalization. So decriminalization of drugs, sex work, homelessness, because all of those things, right, are introductions to the criminal justice system, which makes it harder to get good jobs, makes it harder to get good housing, especially housing. You know, I used to be on the Lyndale board, and there was one block on Lyndale that you could live on if you had certain charges on your record, because otherwise you're too close to a school. It's great having community schools, but or whatever, couldn't qualify for the housing, and you know, and a lot of that comes from kind of bullshit charges.
I know. Like we saw not having a house extremely criminalized here. Like that I mean, this past summer, and it's happening right now as well. Like to decriminalize that. And also, I mean, the word criminal almost, it seems like a weaponized term. Like we could almost say survivalism, you know, like people are in survival mode. When you don't have, you know, a roof over your head and food to eat, you know, you're gonna be in survival mode. So with that said, just kind of wrap it up in 3 last questions here. You said community coming together. What changed your perspective, or how did that experience impact you being a medic down in some of the areas where the uprising was happening, like around the 3rd Precinct?
Yeah. It's kind of, it all like really came back this week.
Well, we're on the anniversary.
You know? Yeah. I'm glad I was there, because sometimes now when I see the media, when I read the news, I feel a little bit crazy. Like, oh, were the police really that violent? Did I make it up? You know, because there's all this call now for more police and few bad apples, and I have to remember back to when I saw dozens of officers shooting at teens, right? Black and brown teens who were holding signs or nothing at all, right? And I remember, because I've worked with the council for a long time, calling them and being like, can you call off these police? It's really violent out here. They're out of control. And a council member is telling me, no, we can't get anyone to listen to us. And you know, if you go back on their tweets at that time and all of that, you know, it seems clear that the MPD had gone rogue at that moment.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, and so within 5 minutes of getting to the 3rd Precinct, when I went to medic, I got shot by a tear gas canister, like right away.
Wow.
You know, and I think it's because I was marked as a medic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's no wonder. I mean, like, and also outside of the Brooklyn Center Police Department, medics were getting arrested. They're getting hit with rubber bullets. It kind of goes to show you how far they can go if they want to turn it up that much, which is just terrifying.
Yeah.
That really is terrifying.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, like, with that being said, does the mayor have any power to reel that in or prevent that?
Yeah, so the mayor is in charge of the police. Yeah. Right now, the one department the mayor is in charge of is the MPD.
Yeah. So that kind of falls on the homies' shoulders, like when that happened.
Yeah.
In short. So what would your relationship be with the chief of police, with the police, if you're mayor?
Yeah. So.
Or would there be a relationship?
There would definitely be a relationship, because I think, like, you know, we're not gonna get rid of the police department overnight. No.
We're not saying abolition and like get rid of them all. Like, and even if we are saying abolition, there's steps to get to that, right?
Yeah.
You know, like what's the beginning like connection with you and the police.
Yeah. Well, I think it's getting a lay of the current, what's going on in the landscape of the officers who are still there, right?
Yeah.
Because we know 2 years ago of officers who were in the Federation, they voted Bob Kroll in 2-1.
Yeah.
And so I think it's about, I would love to have a relationship with the chief where we could think about how we transition emergency response to the right responders, right?
Yeah. Maybe get rid of killer cops. If you killed somebody and you're still here, you can now leave, Mm-hmm. Who knows? Mm-hmm. I mean, like Derek Chauvin was on the force and had, when you look at his track record, how does that go underneath the radar? Like he had pistol whipped somebody and then shot him in the stomach. Like there's some egregious things on his record.
Yeah.
Would you deal with certain cops that have really egregious heinous acts of violence or police brutality on their record?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I can't believe I didn't talk about this till now. I support the safety charter amendment that's put forward by Yes for Minneapolis, which gets rid of the police department.
Yes.
And replaces it with the Department of Public Safety,
Mm-hmm.
which can include police officers in there. And so that changes the whole dynamic.
Yeah.
See, I struggle even sometimes to live in that world, but it can be real.
Yeah. Can happen.
And in that case, then we change the architecture.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we don't have these ingrained chain of command and we have more social workers, more mediators.
Yeah.
And I think that's how we get there.
That's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, not reforming our current framework, but really moving to a new one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we talked about this earlier before the cameras went on. What has been your experience? Like everybody will be like, well, in my experience, this is what's made me the perfect candidate for your city. What has been your experience and what has been some of the criticisms of you and showing up as a candidate for mayor?
Yeah. So I'm an organizer and also, have my policy degree from the Humphrey and have been doing work at City Hall for years on the budget specifically and also moving policies related to policing. But I've had this interesting experience where people say, oh, I don't know about Sheila for mayor because she doesn't have political experience.
Okay.
Which to me, it's like I go home for Thanksgiving and they say don't get too political. And so when I say, when I think of political, I'm thinking of the movement, I'm thinking of politics,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of moving things from the community side at City Hall as politics, as experience in politics, So I've had this interesting experience, and I think it gets down to also different understandings of who can and gets to make change. Mm-hmm. Can change really come from young kids taking to the streets, developing mutual aid networks, starting their own organizations?
Yeah.
Is that societal change, or does it always have to come through municipal government, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a great question.
And the places in between there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of organizations galvanized and evolve and grow and begin from the movement.
Yeah.
Let's say we're having a conversation in 2025, time travel for a second.
Okay.
And everybody has given you 5 out of 5 stars. 5 out of 5.
All right. I like this world.
What did you do?
What did I do?
Over the course of those years to get 5 out of 5?
Yeah, I think I probably listened to the people.
Okay.
I hope I listened to the people.
Well, yeah, exactly.
I think, the leaders I trust are leaders who show up and leaders who are real about the decisions they had to make. Mm-hmm. So if it's not an ideal outcome, I respect politicians who are like, yeah, we should have gotten more out of this. Mm-hmm. I fought for this and I'm going to fight for more next time, instead of here's my press conference about all of this $2.1 million we're spending, while the other stuff sort of falls behind. So I guess what I'm saying is transparency.
Yeah, transparency.
When it comes down to it, yeah.
Exactly. And I think that, that is a great place to start.
Yeah.
in just listening to the people and acting on what folks are asking for.
Yeah.
Because what's happening now is that there's transparency whether people like it or not. Like Lisa Bender was like in the hot seat a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and then people discovered, you know, what had happened during Terrence Franklin, during Philando Castile, and it seemed that accountability wasn't happening until the cameras were on. You know, I have this final question from a policymaker. I know I said 3 like 5 questions ago. I see the role of the mayor to be that of someone who will champion the people of Minneapolis. So, on that note, if specific actionable injustices are occurring, will they have mechanisms in place for notifying the mayor's office, whistleblowing about said specific situations, and how will they ensure that the actions they take in response are because it is what is right and not just a presentation of a unified front of the city versus the common person in the city?
Okay, so whistleblowers. Interesting. Yeah. You know, I have to do a little bit more research about what the existing city mechanisms and protections are protecting whistleblowers.
Yeah, like how would, like if somebody was seeing like an injustice in the city, like how would they be protected as opposed to the city against that one person?
Yeah.
And this is coming from a person that's worked in the city.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the story we saw in the Reformer this week, right, about Operation Safety Now, which is oddly similar to Operation Safety Net.
Yeah.
I think I was talking about that with some of my friends. We got to protect people who do those data requests and people who do and people who pull the records too. You know, so whoever asked that question, I hope they reach out to me or like send a proxy because I wanna learn a little bit more about the current protections and of course deeply support protecting those folks and having mechanisms ready.
Well, I mean, this is a fitting ending to this interview. I mean, look at that. Hennepin County Security.
Oh, Lord.
Max, get that.
On the bike path, you know?
Why? Why is he here?
You know, one time I was right here and there was someone staying in camps right over there. And this police officer rolls up and the person was on a bike who was staying there, and the police officer goes and kicks their bike out from under them, so this person falls over. Jeez. And then begins questioning them, yelling at them, you know, did you steal this bike, whatever. And then this person appears to be overdosing.
Yeah.
And the police officer, they're on the ground, the police officer puts them in cuffs first, gets them in the car, and then gets the Narcan out of the back, gets their partner to go get the Narcan out of the back. And that's what I think of when I'm in this spot.
Yeah.
When I see those Hennepin County sheriffs roll up like this. Anyway, sorry, that was
No, because I had driven by and I'd seen Hennepin County sheriff's cars like not busting up, but just criminalizing and brutalizing folks without homes here.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't even. What would, if you were mayor, what would you do about that? Like.
Yeah. Well, one thing the mayor could do is tell MPD to stop evicting encampments. This is railroad authority land, technically, so it's like a cross-jurisdictional thing. But that's what happened this summer is people were forced from city parks to railroad authority to over there on the other side of the Sable Bridge is Met Council land.
Oh, okay.
And so they're kind of like passing the buck of different police officer or police jurisdictions.
Yeah.
Across different parks. So as mayor, I would push for at least, you know, maybe we don't have the MPD. Maybe it's the Department of Public Safety, but to not enforce evictions and then work with my colleagues at the county and Met Council and Railroad Authority and the sheriffs to not
brutalize folks without homes.
Yeah. Again, it's like the resources. We have the resources, and the city could really invest in harm reduction.
Yeah.
And that's something that's part of my platform is pushing for more harm reduction in the city, and that's how we help keep folks safe.
Exactly. Maybe take it out the canine budget. Who knows? Either way, well, I mean, the thing I'm realizing is that the task ahead of you is a daunting one. It's huge,
Yeah.
and I'm glad there's, you know, folks like you and other folks out here running for it, because it's you got a lot on your plate. You got a lot ahead of you. Thank you so much for the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else you want to say? We're at the end here.
Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. Thank you for making the time, Sheila.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.
My pleasure.